There is a quiet tragedy happening in the world today, and most people don't even realize they're living inside it. If you stop and observe the people around you, friends, co-workers, even your own patterns, you'll notice something unsettling. Almost everyone starts strong, and almost everyone dies out. Gyms are filled in January and empty by February. People buy books they never finish. They write goals they forget in a week. They dream loudly but act quietly. And the deeper truth is this: 99% of people fail not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they are wired to fail by design. We live in an era where everything is engineered to break your focus. Our ancestors lived in environments where attention meant survival. If you were distracted, you died. Today, attention is the currency corporations fight over. Your phone makes more noise than your conscience, and your brain, still built like a primitive machine, responds to every notification like it's a threat or reward. You are swimming against a river of digital seduction, and you wonder why you feel exhausted. But the problem goes even deeper than that. Modern humans rely on motivation, a biological spark that has never been reliable. Motivation is a chemical, dopamine, norepinephrine, reward circuits, but chemicals fluctuate. They crash, they disappear. That's why you wake up one morning ready to conquer the world, and the next morning unable to get out of bed. You think something is wrong with you, but the truth is, your biology was never built for long-term consistency. Now, compare this to the ancient world. In medieval Japan, in the mountain temples surrounded by silence and mist, monks practiced meditation every single day without gaps, sometimes for decades, without missing a single morning. They didn't rely on motivation. They didn't wait to feel like it. They had something modern society lost, a structure that removed choice. And when choice is removed, discipline becomes inevitable. But in the modern world, choice is everywhere. What time should I wake up? Should I work today or tomorrow? Should I read or watch Netflix? Should I go to the gym or rest? Should I do it now or later? Every question is a negotiation, and every negotiation is a doorway through which failure enters. The reason 99% fail is not because they are weak. It's because they allow themselves to negotiate with their weaker self. And that weaker self is ancient, powerful, and far more experienced in sabotaging you than you are in resisting it. The monk wakes up at 3:30 a.m. not because he is superhuman, but because his environment is designed to eliminate negotiation. A bell rings, a vow binds him, community witnesses him. His identity is not someone trying to meditate. His identity is a meditator. And that difference between trying and being is the dividing line between those who fail and those who never miss a day. Modern society gives you endless flexibility and then blames you for not being strong enough to handle it. But ancient systems were built on rigidity, repetition, ritual, and identity. They understood something we now ignore. The human brain collapses without structure. Look at modern habits. People rely on apps. They rely on inspiration. They rely on motivational videos. They rely on mood. They rely on energy. Every one of those things fluctuates. Every one of those things betrays you when you need them the most. Meanwhile, monks 800 years ago had a system that never changed, never weakened, never shifted. Their routines survived wars, famines, fires, and personal struggles. They practiced through earthquakes, through death, through harsh winters, through attacks. And here we are, breaking our habits because the weather is bad, or the Wi-Fi is slow, or someone annoyed us. The uncomfortable truth is hard to accept. Ancient people were more consistent than us, not because they were stronger, but because their systems were stronger. Their lives were built around discipline. Ours are built around comfort. But here is where the twist comes in. Even though the world has changed, the brain hasn't. That same brain that helped monks remain consistent is inside you right now. And the same trap that destroys modern discipline, the negotiation loop, is the trap you will escape by the time you finish this video. Because once you understand what the monks built, how they structured their identity, how they eliminated choice, and how they transformed practice into something automatic, you'll realize something shocking. You don't fail because you're broken. You fail because your environment is. And just like the monks, you can rebuild it. Chapter 1. The monastic advantage. Long before modern self-help books, productivity apps, or neuroscientific studies, ancient monks from Japan, China, Tibet, and India had already solved a problem we still struggle with today: how to create a life where discipline doesn't rely on willpower. While the rest of the world was driven by desires, distractions, and emotional storms, monks built a system so strong that their habits didn't just survive, it thrived for centuries. To understand why ancient monks never missed a day, you have to understand what a monastery really was. People today imagine peaceful gardens, bamboo forests, candlelit halls, and calm meditation rooms. But the truth is more intense, more uncompromising, and far more powerful. A Zen monastery was not a place of comfort. It was a machine designed to transform human beings into something different. Every detail, from the moment the monk woke up to the way he breathed, was controlled with absolute precision. It wasn't about restriction. It was about liberation from the chaos of human impulses. At Aihaiji Temple in Japan, founded in 1244 by the Zen master Dogen, the schedule has hardly changed in almost 800 years. Before dawn breaks, before the birds start singing, before the wind even shifts through the trees, a bell rings at exactly 3:30 a.m., not 3:31, not 3:29. The bell has rung at that exact time for centuries, and when it rings, something remarkable happens. Every monk rises. No debate, no inner monologue, no "I'm tired," no 10 more minutes, no negotiation. They rise because the act of rising is not a decision. It is identity. When a monk takes his vows, he doesn't say, "I promise to meditate every day." He says, "I am one who practices." That shift seems small, but psychologically, it's enormous. It is the difference between an action you do and a person you are. Most people today try to build habits through behavior, but monks build habits through identity. And this is where their advantage becomes almost unfair. They lived in an environment where every element reinforced the same identity. Their shaved heads symbolized humility. Their robes symbolized uniformity, removing fashion choices. Their meals were identical every day, eaten in silence, eliminating emotional eating or escape eating. Their days were structured around chanting, meditation, work, cleaning, study, rest. Not one part of the day was based on feeling. Everything was based on form. We think discipline is about force. They knew discipline is about form. Dogen taught that form is emptiness, and emptiness is form, not as a mystical statement, but as a practical system. The form refers to the rituals: sitting, walking, breathing, working. By repeating these forms daily without gaps, the mind becomes empty of resistance, empty of doubt, empty of chaos. And in that emptiness, discipline becomes effortless. To a monk, missing a day doesn't make sense, not because they are superhuman, but because missing a day contradicts their very being. Imagine telling a bird to skip flying, or telling a fish to skip swimming. You're not asking it to avoid an activity. You're asking it to stop being what it is. That is what a monk becomes. Activity and identity become one. Now contrast this with modern life. Today, everything is structured to fragment your identity. You go from one role to another: student, friend, worker, creator, family member. You carry dozens of mini identities, each pulling you in different directions. You negotiate your actions based on mood, convenience, and environment. Your schedule shifts daily. Your responsibilities shift hourly. You live a life of constant negotiation. The monk lives the opposite, a life of zero negotiation. Historically, monks even practiced during war. In several regions of Japan during the Sengoku period, an era of chaos and violent civil conflict, monks kept meditating while samurai armies marched outside their gates. Temples burned, communities scattered, yet the daily bell still rang. The practice still continued. There are documented accounts of monks meditating in freezing winters while snow accumulated on their shoulders, unmoving, unblinking, committed to a form that transcended discomfort. To them, suffering wasn't a signal to stop. It was a part of the training. Modern people escape discomfort. Monks embraced it purposely, knowing that comfort was the enemy of transformation. But why? What made them so devoted? Because monks understood something we have forgotten. The greatest battle is not against the world. It is against the self. And the self is the most dangerous opponent you will ever face. It knows your weaknesses. It whispers excuses you can't detect. It negotiates with perfect timing. It attacks when you're tired. Most people lose this battle every day. Monks win it by refusing to fight at all. They design their lives so the battle dissolves before it starts. When the bell rings at 3:30 a.m., they do not choose to get up. They get up because they are the kind of person who gets up. When it is time to meditate, they don't wonder if they feel like it. They meditate because the form dictates it. When discomfort arrives, they don't retreat. They remain because remaining is the form. Their secret is simple and terrifying. Remove choice, and discipline becomes inevitable. This is the monastic advantage, the ancient system that modern society has lost. A structure so strong it survived centuries of war, famine, political collapse, and even modernization. And it works because it taps into something deeper than habit. It taps into identity. If you want to understand why monks never missed a day, it's because their practice was not activity, it was existence. And the moment you apply these principles to your own life, public identity, fixed forms, rigid schedule, zero negotiation, you begin to operate on that same ancient frequency. A frequency modern people no longer recognize, but deeply respect. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Irreversible Commitments. Before we go deeper into the monk system, you must understand one of the most powerful truths about human behavior. A truth so simple, yet so often overlooked. Your brain treats commitments differently, depending on whether they can be reversed or not. This single distinction explains why people today can promise themselves a new habit on Monday morning and quit by Wednesday night. It also explains why ancient monks practiced for decades without missing even a single day. Their commitments were not attempts, they were transformations. Modern humans make reversible commitments. Ancient monks made irreversible ones. And the brain reacts to those two things in completely different ways. Let's break this down. When you make a private, reversible promise, something like, "I'm going to start waking up early," or "I'll go to the gym every morning," your brain places that commitment inside what neuroscientists call the optional behaviors category. Optional means flexible. Flexible means negotiable. Negotiable means weak. The moment you feel tired, stressed, lazy, or distracted, your primitive brain, the same brain our ancestors used to avoid danger, steps in and says, "We can skip today. It's not a big deal. You can always restart." And because the commitment was private, nothing in your environment punishes that weakness. No one knows, no one sees, no one cares. So your mind escapes responsibility and the habit dies. Now contrast that with an irreversible public commitment, the kind monks make when taking their vows. When a monk stands in front of his entire community, shaves his head, puts on the robes, and declares his vow of practice, he is not deciding to meditate every day. He is being reborn into a new identity, and the brain interprets that identity as a foundational truth. Psychologists studying identity-based behavior change have discovered something extraordinary. The brain does not allow you to contradict your declared identity without creating extreme psychological stress. Think about this on a survival level. For ancient humans, identity was tied to social belonging. If the tribe saw you as unreliable, dishonest, or weak, you risked being excluded. Exclusion meant death. So the brain developed a deep biological alarm system. Whenever your behavior contradicts your public identity, your brain sends signals of shame, fear, and danger. This is why monks don't skip practice. The cost of skipping is not disappointment, it's identity death. And this is where modern people fail, not because they lack discipline, but because their commitments carry no consequence. Now let's look at how this applies to your life. When Raphael, the programmer from our earlier example, wrote on paper, "I am a person who meditates every day at 5 a.m. for 90 consecutive days," that was the first step. But when he posted it publicly, everything changed. Because now, failure wasn't just missing a habit. Failure meant contradicting the identity he had declared. It meant facing people who now saw him through a new lens. His girlfriend, his coworkers, his family, his community. Your brain may be modern, but its hardware is ancient. It is still terrified of losing status, reputation, and social integrity. So when Raphael woke up tired, angry, stressed, or in pain, he still forced himself out of bed because the pain of breaking the identity was stronger than the pain of discipline. Modern people often say things like, "I don't care what people think." But neuroscience disagrees. Your brain always cares. A Harvard neuroscientist studying long-term habit formation discovered that public commitments activate the anterior cingulate cortex, a region associated with social pain. This means your brain treats public failure the same way it treats physical injury. When your identity is public, quitting hurts. That's why monks rarely break their vows. Their practice is not a habit, it is a public identity. Their community is not a suggestion, it is a mirror reflecting who they are. Now imagine combining this ancient identity mechanism with modern psychology. Imagine building a discipline system where your commitments are written, your identity is clear, your declaration is public, Your environment expects consistency. Your brain sees quitting as a threat. This is not motivation. This is architecture. Let's go deeper into the psychology of these irreversible commitments. 1. Irreversible commitments. Remove the escape door. Most people quit because they know they can. A monk continues because quitting is unthinkable. Once quitting is removed from your mental menu, the brain begins adjusting to the only path left: continuation. 2. Irreversible commitments create social gravity. When your identity is public, you attract accountability without asking for it. Your environment now reflects your new self. People watch. People comment. People expect. This creates psychological momentum. 3. Irreversible commitments activate evolutionary fear. Humans fear 3 things: loss of status, loss of reputation, loss of identity. These fears are ancient survival triggers. Monks use them intentionally. Modern people avoid them, but if you harness them correctly, they become the strongest force behind your discipline. 4. Irreversible commitments bind you to a timeline. A monk's vow is not for a week. It's for life. And because time is no longer a variable, the mind stops wondering, when will I stop? It shifts to, this is who I am forever. Consistency emerges from permanence. 5. Irreversible commitments force identity alignment. If you declare, I am someone who wakes up early, your brain begins reorganizing your behavior to match that truth. Just like someone who says, I am vegan, or I am a Muslim, or I am a firefighter, or I am a father. Identity is stronger than intention. Humans bend behavior to match identity automatically. This is why monks don't have to try. Their identity does the work. Now, combine all of this with forms, fixed schedules, and practice without gaps, and you get the Gyoji system, the ancient psychological framework that turns ordinary men into unstoppable machines of discipline. And the real transformation begins when you apply this to yourself. Because once you make your identity public and your commitments irreversible, the old version of you, weak, inconsistent, self-negotiating, begins to die. And a new version emerges, one that people fear, respect, or simply don't understand. Most people fail because their identity is flexible. Monks succeed because their identity is permanent. If you want their discipline, you must adopt their psychology. Chapter 3. The System of Unbreakable Routine. There is a reason routines collapse in the modern world, and it's not because people are weak. It's because the modern approach to discipline contradicts the natural architecture of the human brain. People say, I'll wake up when I feel ready, or I'll work out when I have time, or I'll read when I'm in the mood. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. They are depending on randomness to produce consistency. That is like expecting a river to flow in a straight line without building channels to guide it. Monks understood something modern society forgot. Your routine must be stronger than your emotions. It must be a structure, not a feeling, a form, not a preference, a command, not a negotiation. And the foundation of that structure is fixed hours. You see, in a monastery, time is not a suggestion. It is a law. The bell rings at the same time every day. Meals happen at the same time every day. Meditation begins at the same time every day. Sleep happens at the same time every night. The human brain loves predictability. The body loves patterns. When you repeat the same actions at the same time every day, the nervous system begins to anticipate the behavior before you even think about it. This is why monks don't wake up tired or confused or unmotivated. Their bodies learn the rhythm. Their biology synced with their environment. Their muscles, hormones, brain waves, even their breathing aligned with the schedule. But when your schedule changes every day, the brain doesn't know what to prepare for. It stays in survival mode. It burns energy on decisions. It wastes glucose on planning. It confuses your circadian rhythm. It creates friction where there should be flow. This is why fixed hours matter. They eliminate the single most destructive force in modern discipline, decision fatigue. Most people don't fail at the behavior. They fail at the decision before the behavior. Monks removed the decision. Raphael, in our earlier story, understood this the hard way. He wasn't failing because meditation was difficult. He was failing because deciding when to meditate was difficult. Once he chose a fixed time, 5 a.m. every morning, half of his mental battle evaporated. He didn't wake up and wonder when to meditate. The answer was already written. But the monks didn't stop at when. They also controlled what. This is the second pillar of unbreakable routine, predictable forms. Dogen taught that practice must follow a form, a specific sequence of actions repeated exactly the same way every day. Because the brain doesn't automate chaos. It automates patterns. If your routine changes daily, the brain cannot shift the behavior from the conscious mind to the subconscious one. That means every day you have to try. And trying is the first step toward giving up. Most people fail not because their habits are too hard, but because their habits never become automatic. They stay in the realm of effort. Effort exhausts. Exhaustion breeds negotiation. Negotiation creates gaps, and gaps kill discipline. So monks practice the same meditation posture, the same breathing rhythm, the same chanting, the same work routines every single day. Over time, these actions move into a different part of the brain, the basal ganglia, the region responsible for automatic behavior. A researcher from MIT demonstrated that a habit becomes automatic after roughly 66 days of unchanged repetition. That means the same time, same place, same form. Once this threshold is crossed, the brain begins to run the action like a script. The body takes over. Conscious effort is no longer required. Monks have known this for centuries. Their secret was simple: repetition until resistance dissolves. This is why in Raphael's 6th week of practice, something remarkable happened. He began performing his push-ups before he even registered what was happening. His body had taken over. His brain wasn't deciding, it was obeying. This is the moment discipline becomes effortless. People today don't reach this stage because they keep interrupting their routines. They restart every week. They modify the plan. They change the timing. They change the method. And by doing that, they reset the brain to day one repeatedly. They never reach automaticity. Ancient monks structured their routines to avoid this trap entirely. Everything was constant. Everything was predictable. Everything was repeatable. Even the transitions between activities were precise. A monk didn't randomly walk from meditation to kitchen duty. He followed prescribed steps, turning corners a certain way, maintaining posture. It wasn't rigid for the sake of control. It was rigid for the sake of identity. Every movement reminded him, I am this. I do this. This is who I am. Imagine applying that to your own life. Imagine waking up at the same time every day, performing the same sequence of morning actions, following the same rituals, letting the routine flow through you without hesitation. The modern world will tell you this is restrictive, but the truth is the opposite. Structure creates freedom. Predictability creates peace. Routine creates power. Look at elite athletes, top performers, even the world's most effective CEOs. Their morning routines look almost identical. Their schedules look robotic. Their behaviors are repetitive because high performance requires boring consistency. The monks understood this centuries before science proved it. Their final layer of the unbreakable routine is practice without gaps, which you'll explore deeper in the next chapter. But here's the essence. Once the pattern is established, it must continue, even if slowed, even if weakened, even if adapted. Because the moment a gap opens, the old identity finds its way back. This system works not because monks are supernatural, but because they built an environment that makes inconsistency nearly impossible. You are not supposed to fight your weaker self every day. You are supposed to design your life so your weaker self cannot take control. Modern people chase motivation. Ancient monks built systems, and systems beat motivation every single time. By the end of this video, you will be able to build your own monastic routine, your own Gyoji system, not to imprison you, but to free you. The freedom to focus, the freedom to become unstoppable, the freedom to be someone others cannot understand or match or out-discipline. This is the path to unbreakable routine. And once you step into it, everything in your life begins to change. Chapter 4. The Internal War, Mind versus Body. Every journey toward transformation begins with excitement. You make a plan. You imagine the new version of yourself. You feel a spark, a burst of hope, a surge of energy, and you believe this time will be different. But then something strange happens. Days pass. The excitement fades. The plan becomes heavier. The routine feels harder. And then, almost without noticing, you begin to negotiate. This negotiation is not random. It is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is biology. The oldest and most stubborn part of you rising to protect itself. You must understand this truth. When you attempt to change your life, you are starting a war against your own body. The body is not your enemy, but it is loyal to your past, not your future. It obeys what it knows, not what you dream. And when you try to break your patterns, your body fights back with precision. This is why the first 2 weeks of any habit feel like walking through mud. It's not just psychological resistance, it's neurological rebellion. Let's break down this internal war. When you decide to wake up early, meditate, read, pray, train, or build anything meaningful, your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, becomes excited. It wants to push forward. But the limbic system, the emotional, survival-driven part, sees change as a threat. Change requires energy. It requires discomfort. It requires stepping away from predictable survival patterns, and the limbic brain hates that. So it fights. How? Through cravings, through doubt, through thoughts that sound logical, but are secretly destructive. Just skip today. You deserve rest. You're tired. You can restart tomorrow. Don't push too hard. This is too much. These thoughts are not you. They are the voice of your old identity trying not to die. Monks knew this better than anyone. They understood that the first enemy a man faces is not laziness, not fear, not external pressure, but his own flesh. The body will resist because the body loves patterns. You slept late for 10 years. Your body wants that again. You avoided discomfort for years. Your body wants that again. You lived without structure. Your body wants that again. When a monk begins training, the first weeks are brutal. Their legs ache during meditation, their backs hurt from sitting upright, their stomach growls from simple meals, their sleep feels too short, their muscles stiffen from work practice, their emotions rise and fall like storms. But monks are taught something profound. Your body does not need comfort. It needs consistency. Dogen Zenji, the founder of the Soto school of Zen, wrote that the body and mind drop away only after the practitioner passes through the initial wall of resistance. This is not poetry. It is instruction. The body refers to physical cravings, and the mind refers to emotional habits. When both drop away, the practice becomes effortless. The internal war ends because the old identity has been defeated. This is exactly what Raphael faced in our earlier story. His first week was chaos. His second week was rebellion. His third week was attack. He woke up each morning feeling like his mind was arguing with itself. His body felt heavier than usual. His eyelids resisted opening. His thoughts felt foggy. Every morning a negotiation began. Why am I doing this? This is pointless. One day won't hurt. I should sleep in. This isn't healthy. What's the point of being this strict? Most people don't realize this. Your old self is intelligent. It knows your weaknesses. It knows which excuses you find believable. It knows exactly when you're tired, hungry, stressed, or emotional. It waits for those moments to strike. This is why Raphael's first 2 weeks felt like war. But something remarkable happened in the third week. The dialogue became louder, and that's how he knew he was close to breaking through. Because the internal war always intensifies right before victory. Just like a candle burns brightest before it dies, your old identity screams the loudest right before it fades. Monks used to say that the mind rages before it surrenders. This was not metaphorical. It was recognition of a universal psychological pattern. Think of addiction. Think of procrastination. Think of fear. Think of unhealthy habits. The moment you fight them consistently, they fight back harder, but the moment you cross the threshold, they collapse. And that collapse begins when the body and mind accept the new pattern as reality. How does that happen? Through repetition, through fixed forms, through non-negotiable hours, through eliminating choice, through identity shift, through practice without gaps. By Raphael's fourth week, something shifted. He woke up and found his feet touching the floor before he even processed what was happening. His body had stopped negotiating. It had started obeying. By the sixth week, the internal war was over. His muscles woke up ready. His mind knew the routine. His emotions no longer resisted. He wasn't fighting to practice, he was practicing automatically. Monks call this shugyo, training that dissolves the self. When the resistance dies, the real transformation begins. Because at this point, you're not using motivation. You're not using force. You're not using energy. You are operating on autopilot, the same way monks have for centuries. When modern people say, "I wish I had discipline like monks," what they don't understand is this. Monks don't have discipline. They have systems that remove resistance until discipline becomes identity. The internal war is the hardest part. Most people never get past it, not because they're weak, but because they expect the war to end in a week. Monks know better. They expect the war. They prepare for the war. They stay until the war ends. And this is why they win. Your internal war will not be easy. It will not be comfortable. It will not be gentle. But the moment you understand that resistance is not a sign to stop, but a sign that you're on the right path, you begin to shift into a new level of discipline. The old self does not die quietly. It dies fighting, but it does die. And when it does, you become someone new, someone unstoppable, someone different, someone most people cannot understand. People fear your discipline because they cannot imagine surviving the war you went through, but you can, you will, and once you do, you will never be the same. Chapter 5. Practice beyond circumstances. If you want to understand why ancient monks never missed a day, you have to remove the modern fantasy that their lives were peaceful, calm, and predictable. People imagine monks training in quiet temples, surrounded by cherry blossoms, waterfalls, and candles, but history tells a different story, a much harsher one. Monasteries were not sheltered havens. They were battlegrounds of chaos, famine, fire, war, and death. And yet, through every disaster, one thing remained unshaken. The practice continued. This is where modern people misunderstand discipline. We think consistency requires perfect conditions. We think we need the right mood, the right time, the right equipment, the right energy, the right weather, the right motivation. Meanwhile, ancient monks trained in environments where consistency was not convenient. It was nearly impossible. Let's step into their world for a moment. During Japan's Sengoku period, from the mid-1400s to the early 1600s, the entire nation was engulfed in civil war. Armies marched through towns, villages burned, samurai clashed violently. Food was scarce. Entire regions were wiped out in battles that lasted weeks. And in the middle of this chaos were the Zen monasteries, wooden structures built on mountains, vulnerable to attack and weather. Yet even during those years of destruction, the morning bell at Aheiji Temple still rang at 3:30 a.m. Imagine that for a moment. You are a monk meditating while fires burn in the valley below. You are chanting while distant screams echo across the mountains. You are walking in mindful silence while the world around you collapses. And still, the practice continued. There are written records of monks meditating during winter storms, sitting completely still while snow piled on their robes, forming white layers on their shoulders. Not because they were trying to prove anything, not because anyone would film them and upload it online, but because stopping the practice was unthinkable. This is where the power of their system becomes undeniable. Circumstances never dictated their practice. In modern life, it takes almost nothing to break a routine: a rainy day, a bad mood, a late night, a headache, a busy schedule, a minor inconvenience. The smallest disturbance can break a promise you made to yourself. But monks trained in environments where disturbances were constant, unavoidable, and often life-threatening. And still, they didn't stop. Let's go deeper. There are accounts from temples in Kyoto surviving fires during the 1400s and 1500s. When the flames engulfed the buildings, monks rushed outside, not in panic, but in formation, carrying their robes, instruments, and sacred texts. And once the fire was under control or the temple burned down completely, they would gather in an open courtyard or even on the ashes of their former hall and continue the scheduled meditation. Imagine that level of commitment. Your home burns down, and your response is to continue practicing on the ground where the flames destroyed everything. This wasn't fanaticism. This was identity. When a monk takes vows, he becomes the practice. The practice becomes him. You cannot separate the two. Now contrast this with the modern way of thinking. People say things like, I couldn't work out because the gym was closed. I couldn't read because I left my book at home. I couldn't meditate because I was traveling. I couldn't wake up early because I slept late. I couldn't stick to my routine because I wasn't in the right mindset. This thinking reveals a fundamental flaw. Modern routines depend on perfect conditions. Monks survived because their routines depended on nothing. No equipment, no environment, no comfort, no convenience, no external stability. The practice was portable. It lived inside their identity. This brings us to a powerful Zen principle. If the hall is lost, practice in the field. If the field is lost, practice in the ruins. If the ruins are lost, practice in the mind. In other words, location doesn't matter. Comfort doesn't matter. Circumstances don't matter. The only thing that matters is continuity. This is why monks endured. And this is why modern people struggle, because they tie their habits to conditions instead of identity. Now, let's return to Raphael's journey. When he traveled for work on day 40, everything in his routine fell apart. No meditation cushion, no quiet room, no gym, no predictable morning, no schedule. He could have easily said, "There's no way I can stay consistent while traveling." That's what 99% of people do. That's why 99% fail. But he remembered the ancient principle. Practice must continue, even in fragments. So he did push-ups in an airport bathroom. He meditated in the back of an Uber. He read on the plane. The routine wasn't perfect, but it was continuous. He kept the river flowing. And here lies the secret. Consistency is not about perfection. It is about identity without interruption. People think missing one day is harmless. Monks know missing one day is fatal, not physically, but psychologically. Because the moment you skip once, you teach your brain that skipping is possible. You open a gap, and in that gap, all your old patterns return like shadows entering a cracked door. The monks understood something science is only now confirming. The brain cares far more about continuity than intensity. A short meditation is better than skipping. A slow workout is better than skipping. One page of reading is better than skipping. Why? Because continuity protects identity, and identity protects discipline. This chapter teaches you a truth most people never realize. Discipline isn't destroyed by difficulty. It's destroyed by breaks. It's not the storm that kills the routine. It's the gap. Monks faced storms, literal and internal, far greater than anything modern humans deal with. And still they continued. If they could practice through war, fire, death, and famine, you can practice when you're tired, when you're busy, when you're stressed, when you're traveling, when you don't feel like it. Because it's not about feeling, it's about continuity. The world doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be relentless. It needs you to be someone who continues, no matter the circumstances. Chapter 6. Pre-Solutions, Preparedness of Ancient Orders. If you followed the journey up to this point, then you already understand the external simplicity and internal power of ancient monastic discipline. But now we step into the part of the system that most people have never heard of, the part that explains why monks succeed even under pressure, chaos, or unexpected obstacles. This is the principle of pre-solutions, the ancient art of solving tomorrow's problems before they happen. If fixed hours remove negotiation, and forms remove decision, and continuity removes collapse, then pre-solutions remove sabotage. See, Most people don't quit because they are lazy. They quit because they are unprepared. Every routine looks strong until life throws its first punch. A child wakes up sick. A boss calls an emergency meeting. The rain cancels your run. Your phone dies. You oversleep. Traffic delays you. A surprise event ruins your schedule. A guest sleeps in your living room. Your gym closes for repairs. One unexpected moment, and the entire routine breaks like glass. And once it breaks, it never truly goes back to its original strength. Modern humans build routines like glass. Monks build routines like iron. Why? Because monks never wait for the problem to arrive. They solve the problem before it even has the chance to appear. To understand pre-solutions, you must imagine life inside a monastery. Monks wake up at 3:30 a.m., meditate at 4 a.m., eat at 6 a.m., chant at 7 a.m., work at 8 a.m., study at 10 a.m., and so on. But here's the part people don't know. Monks train not only for the schedule, they train for the disruption of the schedule. What happens if a monk gets sick? What happens if a storm floods the meditation hall? What happens if the lanterns blow out and the temple becomes pitch black? What happens if the rice for breakfast burns? What happens if an earthquake shakes the building? What happens if war breaks out? They don't improvise. They don't panic. They don't negotiate. They follow a pre-written answer. If the meditation hall floods, practice in the courtyard. If the courtyard floods, practice in the dining hall. If the dining hall burns, practice on the temple steps. If the temple burns, practice on the mountain trail. If the mountain trail collapses, practice in your room. If your room collapses, practice in your mind. Zen teachers repeated a powerful proverb: as long as you breathe, you practice. In other words, nothing, absolutely nothing, stops the sequence. This is the heart of pre-solutions. 1. Pre-solutions eliminate the stress of unexpected obstacles. Most people think they fail because they're overwhelmed when chaos hits. No, they fail because they try to think during chaos. When your car breaks down, when you oversleep, when your boss calls, when the weather changes, your mind enters survival mode. Your emotional brain takes over. Your logic shuts down. Your weaker self becomes louder. Your excuses become sharper. Your cravings become stronger. If you try to make a disciplined decision during this moment, you will lose. Monks understood this centuries before psychology proved it. So they removed the need for thinking during crisis. They replaced it with pre-solutions. 2. Pre-solutions turn obstacles into pathways. Modern people see obstacles as interruptions. Monks see them as alternate routes. If the main road is blocked, take the side road. If the side road is blocked, walk the forest path. If that is blocked, climb the hill. If that is blocked, meditate where you stand. The practice continues. Every obstacle has a ready-made answer. Every difficulty has a pre-decided solution. There is no stuck. There is no pause. There is no restart later. There is no I'll try again next week. There is only continue forward, even if in a different form. 3. Pre-solutions remove the internal loopholes. Modern routines die because humans leave loopholes. If I'm tired, I'll rest. If I'm busy, I'll skip. If I'm stressed, I'll delay. If I'm traveling, I'll pause. Every loophole is a crack in the wall of discipline. Every crack allows the old identity to slip in. Monks seal every crack with pre-solutions. They pre-decide. If tired, still practice, but lighter. If sick, still practice, but simpler. If traveling, practice in micro sessions. If depressed, practice the form without intensity. If overwhelmed, shrink the practice but never stop it. By removing loopholes, they remove the one thing that destroys modern discipline, the idea that you have the option to stop. 4. Pre-solutions turn weakness into strategy. Every weakness you have, sleepiness, distraction, emotional volatility, procrastination, is predictable. You've experienced it before. You know your patterns. But most people don't plan for their weaknesses. They pretend they won't happen. They hope for perfect days. And when a bad day comes, their routine collapses instantly. Raphael, the programmer from our earlier chapters, learned this lesson when he reached the middle of his 90-day practice. He looked back at all the reasons he had failed in previous years: oversleeping, traveling, guests, visiting, feeling sick, low motivation, tight schedule, unexpected work projects, mental stress, lack of equipment, no quiet space. Instead of pretending these problems would magically not happen, he wrote down every single one. Then he created a pre-solution for each. If oversleep, meditate the moment I wake up. If traveling, meditation in car, reading in airport, push-ups anywhere. If sick, 1-minute practice minimum. If no equipment, body weight routine. If mood is low, do it anyway, but slower. If guests at home, practice quietly in the bathroom. If schedule tight, break the practice into 3 micro sessions. And guess what? When the obstacles appeared, and they did, he didn't hesitate. He didn't negotiate. He executed, because the decision was already made. This is the psychological brilliance behind pre-solutions. You don't fight your obstacles. You outsmart them before they arrive. 5. Pre-solutions protect identity. Identity is fragile during transformation. The old identity is always waiting to reclaim control, and the easiest time for it to do that is during confusion or chaos. When the day becomes messy, identity becomes unstable. When identity becomes unstable, discipline dies. Pre-solutions protect identity by providing clarity. No matter what happens tomorrow, you already know who you are and what you will do. You remove uncertainty. You remove negotiation. You remove improvisation. You remove emotional decision-making. You replace all of it with structure. This is why monks appear superhuman. They are not superhuman. They are pre-prepared. And if you apply this system, you become the same. 6. The psychological science behind pre-solutions. Modern behavioral science calls this implementation intention. The formula is, if X happens, then I do Y. Yale psychologists found that when people pre-decide their responses, they experience lower stress, faster action, less procrastination, higher consistency, reduced emotional resistance, increased follow-through rate. In fact, studies show that implementation intentions increase commitment success rates by up to 300%. The monks discovered this hundreds of years before science did. 7. The transformation. By day 70 of Raphael's practice, something astonishing happened. He no longer worried about disruptions. He no longer feared obstacles. He no longer felt anxious about losing his streak. He didn't feel vulnerable. Why? Because he had answers for everything. And a man with answers does not panic. He had become mentally invincible, not because life became easier, but because every difficulty already had a plan. This is what monks teach. You don't need perfect conditions to be consistent. You need pre-solutions. The world will always bring chaos. Your discipline must always bring continuity. This is the way of ancient orders. This is how monks became legendary. This is how a man becomes unstoppable. Chapter 7. Identity, Rebirth, Transformation. There comes a moment in every long journey of discipline where something subtle but powerful begins to happen. The change is not physical. It is not even emotional at first. It is something deeper, something invisible, something that other people notice before you do. It is the moment when the old you begins to die, not symbolically, not poetically, but literally, in the way your brain operates, the way your body responds, the way your identity shifts. And this is the moment most people never reach because they quit before the transformation begins. See, the first stage of discipline is effort, the second stage is resistance, the third is adjustment, the fourth is automation. But the fifth stage, the final stage, is rebirth. This is the phase where discipline stops being something you do and becomes something you are. A monk waking up at 3:30 a.m. is not trying to be disciplined. He is simply living as himself. There is no separation between the person and the practice. This is the transformation the Gyoji system was designed to produce, the merging of identity and practice into one unbreakable whole. To understand this, imagine your identity as a house. Your old self built the foundation, your habits built the walls, your routines built the rooms, your comfort built the windows, your laziness built the furniture, and then one day you decide to rebuild the house. But the old structure won't collapse quietly. It resists. It tries to hold on. It creaks and groans and pushes back. This is the internal war we discussed in the previous chapters. But once you pass through that war, once you remain consistent long enough, the house finally crumbles, not because you force it, but because it can no longer sustain itself in the presence of your new patterns. That collapse is identity death, and what rises from it is identity rebirth, the birth of the unbreakable self. People talk about discipline as if it's an emotion, as if you can feel disciplined. Discipline is not a feeling, it is a form of identity. Monks understood this for centuries. Modern science is just beginning to catch up. Once your identity shifts, discipline becomes effortless because you no longer act against yourself. The behaviors that once felt unnatural now feel necessary. The routines that once felt heavy now feel normal. The habits that once felt forced now feel inevitable. Think of someone who identifies as a runner. They don't ask, "Should I run today?" Running is woven into their identity. It feels uncomfortable not to run. Think of someone who identifies as a writer. They don't wait for inspiration. Their identity pulls them toward the page. Think of someone who identifies as a father or mother. They don't wake up wondering whether to care for their child. Identity makes the decision before thought appears. This is how monks treat practice. This is how Raphael eventually saw his routine. This is what you begin to experience once consistency becomes identity. The practice becomes your default state. The old self becomes foreign. It feels strange, even painful, to skip. It feels unnatural to break rhythm. It feels wrong to betray the new identity. This is when people look at you differently. When they say, "You're obsessed," "You're too strict," "You're not normal," "You're taking this too far." But what they're really saying is, "Your discipline exposes my lack of discipline." Human beings fear what challenges them, and nothing challenges someone more than a person who is becoming what they wish they could be. The psychology of becoming unrecognizable. There comes a moment in transformation when even you don't recognize yourself. Your reactions change, Your energy changes, your presence changes, your standards rise, your behavior sharpens, your focus deepens, your tolerance for nonsense drops, your clarity cuts through everything, your purpose becomes louder than your fears. People may not understand it, people may not support it, people may not like it, but they will respect it, even if quietly, even if reluctantly, because discipline is a rare form of greatness. It is rare because it requires death, the death of comfort, the death of excuses, the death of weakness, and the death of the identity you once protected. And from that death emerges something stronger, something ancient, something primal, something monk-like. The scientific shift neuroscientists call this the moment of identity consolidation. It is when the neural pathways associated with the new behavior become so strong that the old pathways weaken and eventually disappear. Your brain literally rewires itself. Your biological identity updates. What once required discipline now requires nothing. This is why monks meditate without missing a day. Not because they are fighting themselves, but because the part of themselves they once fought no longer exists. Raphael's rebirth. Raphael reached this point long before he realized it. Around day 60, his girlfriend told him, "You're different." Not angry, not emotional, not rigid, just different. His co-workers noticed it. His friends joked about it. His family commented on it. Everyone sensed a shift in his presence. He didn't brag about his streak. He didn't talk about his habits. He didn't preach discipline. He simply lived it. And that is when he understood discipline is quiet at the top. People who struggle talk about discipline. People who are transforming show discipline. People who have transformed are disciplined. By day 90, Raphael completed something even he didn't understand fully, not a habit, not a challenge, not a streak, but a rebirth. He felt it, he saw it, others sensed it. He wasn't trying to be consistent anymore. He simply existed as someone who is consistent. This is your transformation too. When you embrace Gyoji, public declaration, fixed schedule, predictable forms, practice without gaps, and pre-solutions, something inevitable happens. Your weaker self dies. Your old patterns dissolve. Your past identity loses its grip. Your new identity becomes permanent. This is why the disciplined person scares others. It's not the behavior, it's the transformation. You become a living reminder that change is possible, and that possibility terrifies people who refuse to change. And this is the moment you reach greatness, not because you conquered the world, but because you conquered yourself. When the identity rebirth is complete, the monk inside you awakens. The unstoppable self emerges, and the world will look at you and think, "How does he do that?" But the truth is simple. You stopped doing. You started being. This is the power of identity rebirth. This is the final evolution. This is the moment when discipline becomes destiny. Conclusion: the discipline that reshapes destiny. By now, if you've watched this entire video without skipping, without clicking away, without letting distraction win, then you are already different from most people. The average viewer does not make it this far. The average mind drifts. The average person quits. But you didn't, and that tells me everything I need to know about you. This entire video wasn't just a lesson about monks. It wasn't just psychology or history or neuroscience. It was a mirror, showing you the version of yourself you were always capable of becoming. Because this story wasn't about ancient temples. It wasn't about Raphael or Dogen or 800 years of Zen. It was about you. The you who has failed more times than you can count. The you who has started over again and again. The you who has made promises you didn't keep. The you who has tasted motivation but always lost the battle to consistency. The you who dreams but struggles. The you who wants more but fights yourself every step of the way. This video was a message to that part of you, the part that is tired of being tired, the part that is hungry for transformation, the part that is begging for a life that makes sense. For the first time, you now understand why you've struggled. You were not weak. You were not broken. You were not lazy. You were simply trying to build a disciplined life using tools that were never designed to work. Modern society tells you that emotion builds discipline. Monks knew better. Modern society tells you that motivation is enough. Monks knew better. Modern society tells you that habits form themselves. Monks knew better. And now, you know better. Let's revisit what you learned. You learned that reversible commitments fail, but irreversible public declarations create identities that cannot be broken. You learned that fixed hours remove negotiation, the most destructive force in habit building. You learned that forms, predictable sequences of action, allow your brain to automate behavior. You learned that practice without gaps creates continuity, the lifeblood of discipline. You learned that pre-solutions eliminate excuses before they exist. And you learned that identity rebirth is the true goal, the moment when discipline stops being something you force and becomes something you are. Everything in your life is built from identity. You can't behave differently until you become someone different, and monks understood this long before science ever did. Now, you understand it too, but knowledge alone is not transformation. Understanding is not discipline. Awareness is not identity. At some point, and that point is now, you must decide whether you want to remain the person you've always been or step into the version of yourself that has been waiting quietly beneath your excuses. And that decision begins with one thing: your public declaration. Monks take their vows in front of a community because they know a truth most of us keep running from. We are not transformed by the things we whisper. We are transformed by the things we declare. A declaration is not a promise. A declaration is a rebirth. It is the moment where the world witnesses your transformation and your brain rewires itself to match the identity you've spoken aloud. So I ask you, not as a narrator, not as a storyteller, but as the person guiding you through this transformation, what will your public declaration be? Will you be the man who wakes up every day at dawn? Will you be the woman who meditates without fail? Will you be the athlete who trains even when tired? Will you be the creator who writes every morning? Will you be the student who studies without negotiation? Will you be the parent who leads by example? Will you be the person who reshapes their entire life with discipline? What identity will you claim? And who must die inside you for that identity to be born? Because yes, discipline is death and rebirth. The death of the inconsistent self, the death of the weak self, the death of the negotiating self, the death of the old identity that kept you small, and the rebirth of the person you were always meant to become. A person who doesn't rely on motivation, a person who doesn't negotiate with their mind, a person who doesn't seek comfort, a person whose discipline makes others uncomfortable because it reminds them of everything they could be. A person who understands what monks understood centuries ago. Routine shapes identity. Identity shapes destiny. And destiny shapes everything. This is not the end of the video. This is the beginning of a new life. A life where you are no longer pulled by emotion, but guided by structure. A life where you are not a prisoner of your mind, but its master. A life where you are unbreakable. If this video changed something inside you, then subscribe to this channel. Not because I want a number, but because I want to walk this journey with you. I want to help you build the version of yourself that the world cannot ignore. And in the comments, write the declaration that marks the death of your old self and the birth of your unshakable identity. Remember this: people fear the disciplined because the disciplined remind them of their potential. But you are not here to be normal. You're here to become unstoppable. If you've watched this far, thank you. You are meant for more, and now you know exactly how to become it. See you in the next video.